Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why you can't stop thinking? I knew that all along after an event has happened. Well, this new study might have a clue. It turns out how you mentally frame an event, whether you think about it up close or from far away, could change how much this hindsight bias affects you. Today, we're diving into research that explores this fascinating idea. Hindsight bias, that feeling of knowing an outcome was obvious after it happened, is something most of us experience. Think about it, you watch a movie, and after the twist you think, oh yeah, I totally saw that coming. Even if you didn't, scientists have studied this for years. And they explain it as our memory reshaping itself to fit the known outcome. It is like our brain is trying to tell us we were smart all along. The researchers in this paper wondered if changing how people think about things, specifically whether they think about them abstractly or concretely, could affect this bias. They call this different mental state Construal level. Imagine you are planning a vacation. Thinking about the big picture like, I want to relax on a beach, is a high Construal level. Thinking about the nitty-gritty like, I need to pack sunscreen, book a flight with a window seat, and research local restaurants is a low Construal level. They thought this might mess with how our memory works when we try to recall our original thoughts after knowing an outcome. So they designed 2 experiments to test this. In the first experiment, they had students look at a list of statements, some true, some false, and rate how likely they thought each one was to be true. Then they tried to influence how people thought about time. One group was asked to imagine a quiz show happening tomorrow, a close, concrete thought. The other group imagined a quiz show happening 100 years from now, a distant, abstract thought. After this, both groups were shown half of the original statements again, but this time with the correct answer, they then had to recall their original judgment. The core idea here is that if you are thinking abstractly in a high Construal level, you might rely more on the general gist of information, which can be easily swayed by new outcomes. If you are thinking concretely, low Construal level, you might pay more attention to the specific details, which could make your memory more accurate. They used a fancy statistical method called a multinomial model to look at the different memory processes going on. And here is where it gets interesting. Standard statistical tests didn't show a clear difference between the high and low Construal groups, but the multinomial model, which digs deeper into memory processes, revealed something. When people received false feedback, meaning the statement they thought was true was actually false, those in the low Construal level group were more likely to have their original judgment biased. This was the opposite of what they initially predicted. They suggested that maybe hearing false hits harder emotionally for someone thinking concretely, making them work harder to correct their memory. But this correction process itself could lead to more hindsight bias. They then ran a second experiment to see if these findings held up. This time, they used more typical hindsight bias questions, like almanac facts questions. Most people wouldn't know the exact answer to and have to estimate, like, how old was Marie Curie when she won the Nobel Prize? Again, they manipulated Construal level. This time, for the low Construal group, they asked participants to generate an exemplar for a category. For example, if the category was building, they might think of a specific example like Eiffel Tower. For the high Construal group, they asked them to generate a category for a word, like house belonging to the category dwelling. In this second experiment, the standard statistical analysis revealed a significant interaction effect between feedback and Construal level, which means the effect of feedback depended on how people were thinking. When they dug into the multinomial model again, they found that people in the high Construal level group were better at recalling their original judgments, even when there was no feedback. They also made fewer source confusion errors, which is when you mix up where information came from. This suggested that higher Construal levels led to better memory overall. So, what is the takeaway across both experiments? The researchers found that Construal level does influence hindsight bias, but not always in the way they first expected. While experiment 1 suggested low Construal might lead to more bias in certain situations, experiment 2 pointed towards high Construal levels actually improving memory and reducing the bias. The researchers brought in something called fuzzy trace theory, which talks about 2 types of memory traces. Verbatim, which are exact details, and gist, which are the general meaning. They proposed that high Construal might favor gist memory, which is more resilient, while low Construal might rely more on verbatim memory, which can be more easily mixed up or overwritten by new information, especially when it is wrong. This aligns with the findings in experiment 2, where high Construal levels seem to lead to better recall and less bias. The core idea is that when you think about things abstractly, you are less likely to get tricked by new information because you are focusing on the broader meaning, which is more stable. When you think concretely, you are focused on the specific details. And if those details are later proven wrong, it can mess with your memory of what you originally thought. The researchers highlight that these findings are important because they show that the way we frame our thoughts, whether close or far, can literally change our memory and introduce biases. They emphasize that their experimental approach, directly manipulating how people thought, allows for clearer conclusions about cause and effect. However, they also point out limitations. Mainly, the sample sizes not being large enough in some analysis to detect very small effects, and the difficulty in directly comparing the results across their different experimental setups. It is a good starting point, but more research is needed. So, why the difference between the two experiments? It might come down to the type of materials used. In experiment 1, dealing with true-false statements might have triggered negativity bias, where people react more strongly to negative information like false. This might have made concrete thinking more prone to bias in that specific context. Experiment 2, using numerical estimations, likely avoided this, showing a clearer benefit of abstract thinking for memory. Ultimately, the consistent finding across both experiments, especially with the clearer results of experiment 2, is that thinking broadly and abstractly in a high Construal level seems to make us less susceptible to hindsight bias. Partly because it may lead to better overall memory recall and less reliance on easily distorted specific details. It suggests that sometimes stepping back and looking at the bigger picture can actually make us wiser, not just after the event, but in how we remember our own judgments before it. This research provides a neat insight into how our minds work. It shows that our perspective really matters. By consciously trying to think more broadly, we might be able to combat that annoying "I knew it all along" feeling, of course. More studies will be needed to fully understand these complex interactions. So, what do you think? Have you ever noticed your hindsight bias change based on how you were thinking about an event? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the science of memory and bias, please give this video a like and subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more fascinating research breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.